can do mine at noon. Jacqueline's not here.
You can always do yours not on.
Yeah. Or even I don't mind saying.
You can do yours on the.
That was just ultimately it's all going to hinge on how much back and forth I get from the viewers.
You gotta do, man.
So.
You just do your thing.
Yeah. All right, good morning, everyone. Senior Chief Meteorologist Rusty Lord here. We are going to dive into the details of my winter outlook for the upcoming winter season. So we're live on YouTube. We're going to be live on our app, on Facebook. Feel free to hop on any of those, ask some questions on Facebook. If you'd like to know a little bit more about what I'm talking about, I'll try to get in the weeds here a little bit and show you a few things that I looked at and what I expect for this upcoming winter season. So you might have seen, if you're kind of in the know as far as you pay attention to weather things going on and you follow pages on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok and YouTube, it is a La Nina winter that we are heading into. Temperatures have cooled in the waters of the Pacific Ocean near the equator, and that is going to be a part of the equation as to what happens for our upcoming winter. So here over the course of the next several minutes and into the latter end of this broadcast, we're going to talk a little bit about how the winter looks, how I came to some of the numbers that I ended up putting in the forecast, and a few other things that we look at. So I guess first things first, let's show you kind of a couple of the things that I use to talk about as far as the forecast goes. One thing is called the Southern Oscillation Index. I know it doesn't mean much to the average viewer, but basically as this red line goes up, that means that La Nina is strengthening. Now it's going to fluctuate a little bit, and what'll likely happen here is that we will see that be the case over the course of winter. And well, for the most part, it should stay above this zero line that you see here. If that's the case, that means we're firmly entrenched in La Nina here over the last several days and week and a half for that matter. It has been going up at a pretty good pace. So that's a sign that the waters are cooling quite a bit in the central Pacific, and it also deals with different pressure ranges across the Pacific as well. But this is one of the things we look at. Another one that I use occasionally as far as forecasting goes is what we call the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. I know, a lot of words here, big things going on, but if this stays negative, it tends to line up a little bit better with La Nina, and it can be another thing that helps me figure out exactly what's going on as far as the forecast goes. So this has been negative consistently for several years. Part of the reason why we've had several dry winters over the last 4 or 5. There's been, I think, one exception in the last 5 years we've had above average moisture. But this dates all the way back into the 2020 range before it showed any signs of going positive. So part of that has to do with temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, and well, that's kind of what I'm going to talk about right here. So let's dive into it and show you what I'm looking at here. So we are firmly entrenched in a La Nina, fairly weak right now, but that little red line that I just showed you on the chart, that is going up, and right now the forecast is to have a rather weak La Nina, but I wouldn't be surprised if that strengthens a little bit more than what forecasts show. So in the short term, this is kind of how I see it playing out. So let's dive through the details. La Nina means cooler than average waters in the Pacific Ocean near the equator. That's what we have with those shades of blue, but there's also some warm water there in the Pacific Ocean. That kind of can steer things a little bit as well. And we got to look at the ocean currents and the overall temperatures in the Pacific Ocean and give us a little bit of idea. So we have this area of high pressure here. Things spin counterclockwise around this area of low pressure. And what happens is it'll send storm systems pointed right at the Pacific Northwest here. There's also at times a low pressure that's sitting up here over Alaska, so it kind of just creates this funneling effect, and you'll get these storm system that looks like it's going to just fire right at the northwestern part of the United States and then send these over our area. Now sometimes they will just be racing through, and I think over the course of this winter it is going to be a very fast-moving system, fast-moving pattern most of the time. Now we have that taking place in November, even though we're going to be very, very mild, at least for the first half of November. There are going to be a lot of storm systems moving through the middle of the country. And whether or not each one of those impacts us is the question, and if it can bring us maybe a colder day or two amongst the overall warmer pattern. So that is a big part of what I think is going to happen this winter. But every once in a while, we're going to get a dip in that jet stream. And when that happens, that is the colder air that's going to dive down and give us our opportunity to be colder than average for a little bit and give us our snow potential. So these occasional dips in the jet stream in an otherwise fast pattern, these are going to slow down the flow a little bit and bring us our opportunities for snow. So I think most of those are probably going to be in the second half of winter, but a fairly mild start anyway. We're seeing that in November. We'll see if we can hold that into December as well. If we get a colder blast in early December, that may tip the scales on the temperatures in my forecast the opposite direction. I still think we're looking at below average snowfall over much of the area, regardless of how many of those colder blasts we get. 27 to 32 inches of snow. That's the average we get in a winter across the metro area, essentially. So 27 is about the average at Epley. 32 is roughly the average in Valley. So that 5-inch range there, pretty good for what we see across the metro. Now, I think the odds lean significantly lower than that, given some of the previous winters I've looked at. And that's another thing that we will often do with these winter outlooks is look at how the conditions are leading into winter and try to find similar setups and similar situations to previous winters and use a little bit of history to tell us about the future. And in 90% of the cases, the years that I found were a decent match, that usually resulted in lower than average snowfall. So I feel pretty confident that we're going to go lower than that 27 to 32 range. How low is the question? So you can see the odds are pretty good that we're going to be lower than that. I would be very, very surprised this upcoming winter if we go above 32 inches of snow. So let's talk about what I think is going to happen. How about 17 to 22 inches of snowfall for the season? You can see that is about 10 inches below average compared to what we usually see. So that is a little bit more than last season, as a matter of fact. We ended up getting a lot of snow late in the season, February into March, and got us up to about, I think it was 17.4. So I think we're going to be a little bit above last year, but still lower than average. And a lot of you probably want to know what's the worst of the months going to be. You can see my winter highlights for this upcoming season tend to lean this way. I think we're trending mild early, colder than average for the second half of winter. Cold blasts move east and out quickly. It's a very fast-paced weather pattern with several fast changes. The occasional slowdowns will bring us our opportunity to get the snow. Overall, I'm leaning slightly warmer than average, but let me tell you, a lot of the winters that I looked at, we were pretty darn close to average temperatures, meaning maybe it was cold early, warm late or warm early and cold late, it all tended to even out quite a bit with our temperatures on a lot of those winters that I looked at. But slightly warmer than average is the way I'm going to lean now. If we get a couple of cold blasts early in December, that would tip the scales towards slightly cooler than average. That's just how close we are on that. I think December is the key for our temperatures. And then February is likely the month that has the most snow. That was one thing that really stuck out in a lot of the winters that I looked at in the past. February was the snowiest month on several of those. So keep that in mind. Below average snowfall is what we're looking at for a lot of the area. I'd say if anybody bucks that trend, it would be our far northern counties. And I'll show you a map here in a minute that kind of details that. But February, in my opinion, going to have the most snow in our area. So that's where we're at right now. And that is the way I see things. 17 to 22 inches of snow across the area. And overall, we are looking at a very dry winter, in my opinion. A busy winter with a lot of temperature changes, but overall, probably a pretty dry one. So one more thing I want to show you here. So there's a couple of winters that I think really stood out as far as overall snowfall and just the overall pattern. One was 2017, 2018. If anybody remembers that winter, I can bring up this here. And this, see if I can zoom in. Tweaking things a little bit here. Zoom in the page. This was one of the winters. This is 2017, 2018. One of the winters that I used pretty heavily when I was trying to figure out my forecast for this year. Look at our area. We're in this yellow to orangish shade over here. We're talking 12 to 24 inches of snow with maybe some slightly higher amounts. But you go a little farther north and there are some much bigger amounts in our viewing area. So this was a winter where a lot of the systems tracked to our north, but we got really, really close to some snows. So that's something I'll be watching to see just how the overall track sets up and what we're looking at with the storm path. But right now, I think it's going to look a lot like this when we're talking about our overall snowfall for this upcoming winter. Now, what I can do is show you a different one. This is one of the seasons that I used as well, but had a little less snowfall in it. I'll give you a little indication. This one is 2011 to 2012. The season that we used. Hold on, I got to take a drink of water here. You can see the yellow, that yellow shadings again, 12 to 24 inches of snow. So that lined up pretty well with what I'm thinking. But there's a couple little pockets in here. Got a little bit above. It's probably 24 to 30 in a couple of spots. Most of those to the north as well. So you see what we're dealing with here. I think lower than average snowfall. Just a matter of how many different snowfalls it takes to get all that. Maybe is it a couple bigger storms or a lot of smaller storms? We'll see how that goes as we work our way through this. But overall, we're looking at lower than average snowfall, in my opinion, and slightly warmer than average weather during the month of winter. But it'll likely be something where December kind of tips the scales as far as the temperature goes, in my opinion, because if we start to get some colder weather in December rather than most of it holding off for the second half of the season, then that might lean us slightly cooler than average. But right now, we'll go slightly warmer than average, see if we need to tweak things once we get into January, and we will go from there. So let me see if we got any questions we have going on right here. Looks like. Again, if you want to get more details, you can rewatch this if you'd like to. Plus, I got a detailed text version of this on our website if you'd like to take the time to read it and see how things look to play out across our area. But that's the way I see winter playing out for us. 17 to 22 inches of snow, well below average, but a little bit above what we had last year. For some reason, my voice is deciding to cut out on me here. So what we're going to do here is probably wrap this up. If we don't have any questions, we'll keep this going. Yeah, okay. And from this point, again, you can log on to our firstalert6.com and view my winter outlook anytime you need to right there. I'll leave that story posted on our website for all to see.